Welcome to the Goose One channel. It's been over half a decade since the initial release of Undertale, which seems like so long ago seeing the impact it has had on the gaming sphere as a whole. The slow rise and subsequent boom in popularity the game has had since its release has resulted in numerous jokes, memes, and analyses all across the gaming community, and have even reached far outside of it. It would be apt to call Undertale a cultural phenomenon, and it has landed on multiple gamers and even non-gamers' top 10 lists. And like with many, and I'd even say all properties that reach that kind of success, it cultivates a fandom, and eventually, fanworks. And those fanworks are exactly what this video is about. Fanworks, fan creations, fan art, and fan fiction are kind of my specialty. I think about them, I talk about them, and I interact with them a lot. And I've created and am creating a fair share of it myself. Fanworks are in my opinion an integral part of the fandom experience, and can even be amazing on their own merit. And one of the biggest and most prominent type of fan creations in the Undertale fandom are AUs, or alternate universes. While these are not unique to the Undertale fandom, AUs have really been a thing almost as long as fanfiction itself has been. What is unique about Undertale's AUs is the sheer number of them there are. I would list a small amount of them, but I've got a joke about that coming in an upcoming part, so I won't. I've split this video in 3 parts, and I'll have timestamps for all of them in the description below. Like I said in the beginning, AUs have been an integral part of fanfic since the dawn of the medium, but I can't name a single fandom with this many of them, besides maybe Homestuck, but I'm not part of that fandom. This part of the script was written before I read Homestuck. And when I say this, I'm not talking about one-shot fanfics or even long fics where the main cast is suddenly pirates or mafia, or maybe one person survived that originally didn't. If that were the case, even fandoms like Life is Strange or whatever would be in the running for this. Undertale's AUs are unique in a few ways. Firstly, Undertale AUs tend to be very set in stone lore-wise. There's, of course, the occasional mafia tale or pirate tale, but a lot of the AUs tend to have very set in stone lore that can rival Undertale itself in size. They shy away from the vague, oh these characters are now this trope that AUs tend to be in fanfiction spaces, and are more like well-structured universes that could very well be their own games if Undertale itself didn't exist. Which leads well into my next point. Due to this fact, a lot of AUs have fostered their very own fandoms, which is personally one of the things I find most strange about Undertale AUs. These are sub-fandoms, fandoms based around fan creations. Big AUs like Underswap, Underfell, Ink Sands, and Error Sands have an unfathomable amount of fan art and fan games made about them. These AUs almost act like their own entities with their own fandoms, and then you remember, these all exist under the banner of the Undertale fandom. That's all very nice, but those are just ways that Undertale AUs are unique. Symptoms and traits maybe, but not a cause. Why does Undertale have so many AUs though? Firstly, and probably most obviously, Undertale is a game with a lot of unanswered questions and secrets. This leaves fans to think of their own answers and theorize somewhat. The fandom fills in the blanks, comes up with their own answers, but they aren't canon, so they make their own canon in a way. Secondly, Undertale is a game based around consequence and choice, around what influence your decisions have. When you give your players so many options and choices, they are bound to ask, what if I could make other choices? What kind of different outcomes are possible? What if different choices had been made before I even started the game? And what do I wish would have happened but didn't? And those questions are exactly what prompt the creation of these AUs. Thirdly, I think Undertale came out at a pretty opportune time. I feel like 2015 was right around the time that the indie darling hit games started to become more prevalent. These games started gaining more traction, not just in indie spaces, but in the mainstream as well. The success of games like Five Nights at Freddy's and Minecraft got people looking for more games in this previously overlooked corner of the market. At the same time, the general size of fandoms was also starting to grow. The taboo of involving yourself in fandom activities like fan art and fanfiction was starting to lift, and it was becoming the cool thing to make fan art and such. In my opinion, this combined with the previous aspects I mentioned all culminated into the huge amount of Undertale AUs that is present right now. But there's one question still left unanswered. Why the fuck is sand so prevalent in all of them? If you were to look at Undertale, play through it for your first time without any outside influence, Sans would not be the character that stuck in your mind the longest. He certainly wasn't for me. Undertale as a game has so many interesting characters, from the shy scientist Alphys and her potential fish girlfriend Undyne, to the lovable Papyrus or the vain robot Metaton. In context with a lot of them, Sans really doesn't stick out that much. He's mainly used as a comic relief. Despite that, Sans is often the focal point of a lot of AUs. A lot of the time he's one of, if not the most powerful character in them. I mean, just look at the animated web series Underverse. It's an incredibly apt example of what I'm talking about. Underverse's main cast consists of a few characters. Classic Sans, Underswap Sans, Underfell Sans. And then of course we have a few auxiliary characters, Ink Sans, Air Sans, Cross, Extil Sans, Nightmare Sans, Dream Sans. Okay, you get my point. Underverse's cast exists almost entirely out of different Sanses. I'm not dissing it, by the way. I love Underverse. It's really well animated and written, and Nyx the Shield is an incredible composer. I'm just trying to prove a point. Sans is basically the main character of the Undertale, well, multiverse. But why? I think one of the reasons Sans is so popular is his general mystique. He's mainly played as a comedy relief, but a few choices and routes can reveal some deeper and darker secrets about him. And in the Genocide route, he really reveals a side of him you don't see anywhere else, except a few glimpses throughout the game. There's a lot we just don't know about him, and that's what makes him interesting. Also, throughout the Genocide route, he plays somewhat of an antagonistic role, and fandoms absolutely love redeemable villains and lovable anti-heroes. Sans fits that role better than most other characters. I mean, we have Flowey and we have Asgore as antagonists, but they really fill a different role. Sans really plays into that edgy anti-hero type as much as any other Undertale character does. He's funny, he doesn't take himself too seriously, except when he does. At points, Sans just gets really dark out of nowhere, which is actually a really cool twist on what many expect it to be just a comic relief. But it also plays exactly into what fandoms want. He seems like the adorable, funny, chubby while being a skeleton somehow man, but there's more to him that we don't outright know. He's darker than we think, and that attracts a lot of people to his character. It's also what gets people to make their own versions of him. Undertale fans were young, they were kids, and they wanted to experiment with this fun and exciting character archetype that they just discovered and had never seen before. But they wanted to tweak it a bit, make it their own. This interpretation is heavily inspired by Sarah Zed, especially her takes on the One Slur, which I really think carry over in a few aspects. Fans attached themselves to Sans and made him everything they wanted him to be, everything they wanted to explore and experiment with. And with that comparison to the One Slayer, it's impossible to ignore Sans's role as one of Tumblr's trademark sexy men. If you have no idea what I mean, God bless your soul, but to give a brief explanation, the Tumblr sexy men phenomenon describes a specific character archetype that, at the height of Tumblr fandomism, dominated fandom spaces. It's the type of character I kind of described earlier, mysterious, edgy, and they aesthetically appeal to the fandom in some way. And again, Sans fit into this archetype like a fucking glove. Anyway, to conclude this segment, Genocide Root Sans has been a disaster for human society and should have never been created. In these past two chapters, I've done a lot of explaining and talking, but I want to take this chapter to shout out some AUs that deserve it. Because at my core, I love fan works and fan creations, and Undertale AUs definitely fall under that category. First up, we have Underverse. I did actually mention this one earlier, but I want to go a bit more in depth about why I like this one so much. Underverse is an animated series created by animator Jakey Jael Peñalosa. I tried, okay, it's a difficult name for me. It's kind of the Avengers Endgame of Undertale AUs, bringing together a huge amount of universes and characters and telling a surprisingly coherent story throughout all of it. Compared to one of its contemporaries that started around the same time, Glitchstill, Underverse manages to deliver a lot more of a straightforward story. It's got a lot of charm, funny moments contrasted with real emotionally impactful moments, all wrapped into a package of maximum fan service. Character-wise, it's really interesting. Despite the cast being made up of variations of the exact same character, they managed to write them in unique ways. While we haven't gotten a lot of depth into a lot of these characters, there are a few that we get some more insight into. One of these is Ink. His character takes a fascinating turn from how he's portrayed in most fan media. Contrary to his popular interpretation, Ink turns out to be a villain, or at least not a completely morally pure character. It's not necessarily an unexpected twist, but it's an interesting one. It's a really cool thing that JL decided to do, and they had decided on pretty early. And I also wanted to mention how well animated it is. It's fully animated by one person if I'm correct, but it looks amazing, the animation is smooth, the fight choreography is phenomenal, the fights are dynamic and the soundtrack is great. Next, Shield is an amazing composer and he's the perfect one for the series. All in all, both Underverse and its prequel Extil are really well made and deserve so much attention. Then, I wanted to pick one of the classic AUs, ones like Undertale, Inktil, Disbelief. I like a lot of them, but a lot of the AUs from that early era really fall into the same category for me. But if I had to pick, I'd have to be the most OG of the OG, home of Blueberry himself, Underswap. But honestly, I don't love the original Underswap that much. Like, it's a cool idea, but in the end, it kind of just turns into the same story with characters that act the same way, they just have altered designs. Which is where TS Underswap comes in. TS Underswap is a modern-ish revamp of the classic Underswap concept. What it basically aims to do is swap the places of characters in the story like the original Underswap does, while retaining their personality. This results in characters like Asgore now being the caretaker of the ruins without it just being Toriel with a different sprite. We end up with an underground that looks miles different from our Prime universe due to the fact that people with different personalities and different ways of approaching things will just result in completely different things happening. I think it's a really interesting approach, and they're already working on the game. There's a demo out already that I will link in the description below, but from what I've played, it's more than just an interesting idea. It's executed really well. It feels like playing Undertale, but it's just a bit different. Almost reminiscent of Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. You're playing the game you know, but there are changes that remind you that it's just not the same. Flowey's in there to greet you into the underground. Asgore's the caretaker of the ruins now, showing you the ins and outs of puzzles and the basics of battle. It just takes everything you know about Undertale and just shakes it around a little. And to follow the rule of freeze like I did with my chapter count, I'm ending this segment with one more AU. Inverted Fate is a webcomic based on Toby Fox's Undertale. It canonically takes place after a failed True Pacifist playthrough in which a god tier Azrael wins the final battle and beats the player character. He continues to reset the universe, but something goes wrong and the souls of the 6 main monsters switch around without their personalities changing. From this description, you would assume Inverted Fate is very similar to Underswap. And in some ways it kind of is. But the way it truly differentiates itself is in its medium. Most AUs are games or just concepts thought up in someone's head, but the webcomic aspect of Inverted Fate really sets it apart from the herd. Not only that, but it also features supplementary minigames, which are placed where the boss fights would be if it was a game. Besides the technical aspects, Inverted Fate is also just a really well written story. Papyrus in Inverted Fate is a fascinating take on his character, and Undyne even more so. They retain their original personalities while in their new roles, which really generates some interesting moments and dynamics. All in all, Inverted Fate is just really great, and I'd recommend it to any fan of Toby Fox's work hungering for more. I'm really happy to finally finish this video. I've been working on this vid for a while, and I've had the idea itself on my mind for even longer. Undertale was one of the first things I really got into, and despite most people looking back at the fandom as terrible and toxic, I really enjoy a lot of what came out of it. While at the moment it's not really a fandom I participate in anymore, I still look back at Undertale itself and even the fandom at times with fondness. And despite sounding kind of condescending at points, this video comes from a place of love and appreciation. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. See y'all later.